I think we have sound.
Hold on. Maybe it caught up. I don't know. Still trying to put my ears on. Having a moment.
Let me see. If you can hear us out there in YouTube, let us know. Any of our comments?
Yes, it looks like it's working now.
Oh, we have sound.
Sorry for the delay, everyone. Thank you, Christian and Kevin, for saving us.
For saving us. Of course.
All right, let's get to it.
Mm-hmm. Will do.
Put my earphones on.
I've used up my wine.
We can get you more.
Sure.
All right, we got to do the show now.
Okay. And just message me everything.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties. Our IDT department helped us out with it. Levi already said this, but we'll do it again. This week's episode of Covendom, I think it's season 2, episode 5.
Yes.
And it's going to be a bit wonky because we're going to be silent in the beginning and we don't really edit the videos.
So sorry.
This is my co-host, Levi Rowland, and I'm his lovely co-host, Brian Cain.
Ever so gentle.
Tonight's subject is going to be on witchcraft and nature. Levi did do a card already. I'll let him explain it to you since you couldn't hear him.
Yes. So my explanation was that I did not bring a tarot deck this time. I brought a Lenormand deck, one of my favorites, and we drew the fox, which is cunning. But if you want to know more about Lenormand and what the fox means, because we don't read Lenormand cards alone, we read them as part of stories and narratives. If you want to know more about that, I will be teaching a complete course on the Lenormand deck here at Hex on the 9th. You can find that event through our Hex Facebook page, which has a link to the Eventbrite. And if you're not in New Orleans, you can still participate, buy tickets, and learn the entire deck and the divination system therein, because we are going to be live streaming classes through Hex. So it's a really exciting thing. It's a deck I think a lot of people love, and it's, especially if you're getting tired of tarot or if tarot is not your thing, it's a wonderful way to expand your ability to read cards. So that's February 9th, and you can find it throughout our pages. Okay.
Do you have to reintroduce our guest?
Yes, and of course, since you did not hear anything in the beginning, this is our amazing guest, Ellie Barnes, world-renowned psychic, Alexandrian priestess, and occult wunderkind.
And
she
famous
is
painter.
One of our favorites.
Famous painter. Thank you guys for having me on the show.
Yes, it was a pleasure.
I'm so thrilled. I've been watching it a year, desperately wishing to be on the show, and now I'm here live. Hello.
She is. She is amongst the children.
So for our show and tells tonight, did you have one?
Mine was the Lenormand thing.
Remember, okay, that was yours.
February 9th.
Keep cheating with that. All right, so I'll give you guys my show and tell. So I brought with me today the Alexandrian, or Pinnacle of Alexandria. It's not Alexandrian witchcraft. It's the Pinnacle of Alexandria, named after the city, and inspired by the mysteries of that city. I was inspired to create this pentacle while I was writing my book, Initiation into Witchcraft. And at the time, I only had 3 chapters done, and I was sort of jumping ahead because I was thinking about how I wanted to introduce tools and sigils, and there was some art that went into that book on my part.
Right,
I designed 2 sigils, and I designed this pentacle, and I spent an evening reflecting on this and what was going to be on it and drawing it out, and then finally came up with the final product and presented it to my husband, as the first person that it was presented to. He didn't know what he was going to say, because I'm mixing in all these different things, and he put it on the computer and made it mathematically perfect. I don't have that skill. So this is actually sold in Hex and Omen in Salem, New Orleans, and you can order it on hexwitch.com. It's very heavy. It is copper.
It's beautiful.
It's the heaviest pentacle I've ever known of. It is very heavy. And I wanted to share it with you. So it's a part of my book. It's part of my journey. It is a pentacle to Serapis and Isis and the mysteries of Alexandria, Egypt. It is reconstructed. It's inspired. It's channeled, I would say, really even.
Right.
I'm quite fond of it, but no, it's not. It's not the pentacle we use in Alexandrian witchcraft. Anyway, that's my share for this evening.
Beautiful.
Yes, loved it.
So let's get to the show. Levi, Why don't you tell us what you think of this show and what you want to get out of it?
Yes, so if you didn't hear during our little technical difficulties, the theme of our show today is nature and witchcraft, or witchcraft and nature. And I think we were talking a bit before the show about that seems to be almost an immediate association people have with the word witchcraft, especially in the modern context. They think of being in the woods, being in nature, using a lot of herbs, growing plants, baneful herbs, if derogatory things said towards people who practice witchcraft, tree huggers, dirt worshippers, all of that. And then there's the larger concept I think that we'll hit on, which is, well, what do we mean by nature? Do we just mean trees and plants, or is witchcraft engaging with nature in a larger philosophical sense, right? So there's a lot of ways to look at nature. It's not just herbalism and green witchcraft or whatever. It's also the concept of nature and divinity and what that means to us and how that might separate us from other spiritual traditions and how they view nature, how they view God. And that's why we wanted Ellie to be on here.
Yes. For me personally, I want to look at, what witchcraft has to do with nature now and what witchcraft had to do with the nature in the past. Our ancestors, everyone's ancestors, lived closer to nature. They just did, It wasn't a choice necessarily. It was just plain out circumstance. We today have many barriers between us and nature, and I think it shows and is reflected in the world and the destruction that's going on there. So I really want to look at both those sides of the coin, because both those topics interest me greatly. What is happening now and what is relevant now, and what things were really like, back in the day. But let's first, while we have Ellie, maybe ask her some questions. So let's come up with some questions with Ellie. If you have any questions and you want to call in, the number is, Levi's going to show it to me, 504-321-3472, or you can post your questions in chat and we will gladly answer them.
Absolutely.
So, Ellie.
I want to start by saying two really big concepts. I thought about this topic all week, and the two things that were important to me looking at this are, one, historical fact, like Brian brought up. For forever on the planet, we didn't have electricity or technology or industry. Until the late 1700s, all humans were rural in the sense that we had to hunt and fish and grow and collect food and have our hands in the dirt and be living with the plants and animals to survive and for our survival and thriving. Then in the late 1700s, there was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. People were really forced. They were closing a lot of farms and forcing people to move to cities to work in factories and industry. And so whole generations of kids were being born in dark, dirty, closed off cities. They didn't go outside. They didn't go into the woods and play. And then the reaction to that was the romanticism in art and literature that started in the late 1700s and early 1800s, where writers and painters were expressing our view of the idyllic golden times, often depicted with the Greek mythology, where man had reached his pinnacle of development, that we had arrived at that time period being the best form of ourselves we can be, and the painters began to create these mythic paintings of the sagas of the gods, lots of nature scenes. Everyone had perfect bodies. There was no mole or scar on any breast.
On any breast, nary a one.
And so I think modern witchcraft was born out of a desire for modern man to reconnect with their idealized versions of the past and in nature. And then the other thing I wanted to think about was, I do have a strong belief that witches are people born, not religious witchcraft, operative witchcraft, people born with a different brain wiring and some different skills that include being able to talk to and hear plants and animals, find what is a healing herb or a baneful and killing herb. They would have been able to forecast.
Have you ever killed anyone with an herb?
Well, not on purpose. Not on purpose. Miss Ellie doesn't kill anyone on purpose. It's always accidental.
Said with a little too much honesty. God help us.
And that we have the skills. We are good with our animals. We are good with plants.
So I had a question for you, and it's related to the products that you sell. What is your line called that you sell?
Alos Anthropos, magical
and
art
where can
herbs.
they find it?
They can find it at Hex in Salem and Hex here in New Orleans. We have 2 trees, and on the tree are hanging all of the plants that my partner and I grow. We use Rudolf Steiner's biodynamic gardening conditions and products and style. I use astrology, and I use the weekly, monthly, yearly timing seasonally to do things in the garden. All the plants are grown by me and Ed, and then they're harvested on correct days of the week and correct planetary hours, dried and packaged into blends, planetary blends, dream pillows, charm bags.
They're amazing.
Smudge sticks, fumigation wands. And so it's a better quality plant grown locally in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans in this dirt with this river water, correct astrological conditions, and I think proper respect and work with the plant spirits. I ask those plants to work on our behalf, and I get some great cooperation from them.
Absolutely.
And our products fly off the tree, and I get so many great messages on Facebook about they smelled intensely, they were alive and vital when they took them out of the package. They weren't this little dried brown thing. They couldn't tell what it was. And then it's better in their magic.
They're fabulous looking. They are very whole cut. You can tell that they're fresh. I haven't seen Ellie's new garden, but I did see her original one here. And she did have, the astrological symbols and what have you placed
They're
around.
all planted correct times.
She
hours.
is, definitely probably the foremost herbalist in the coven, I would think, probably.
And Christine.
Yes, Christine is also very good at herbs, but not that vast of a garden. She's like me, she's got a little courtyard.
It's a lot.
But yes, she's got a
lot.
real garden. Like it could be a book itself, and maybe it will be someday.
It will be. Oh, yeah.
It could be. So thoughts on that? Let's kind of do a little bit of a panel thing. We all had kind of the same questions, or not questions. We all had the same kind of idea about the 2 ways of looking at this. So Levi, why don't you start?
Something I said to Ellie before the show is I think one of the things that complicates this whole conversation is what do we mean by nature, and talking about nature as humans. One of the things that frustrates me in a lot of conversations, especially in philosophy that comes from the time period Ellie is talking about, the 18th century, and especially the Industrial Revolution eventually, is this idea that we are outside of nature and we are looking in. It's almost like the discussion is we are looking at an aquarium or a terrarium. No.
A lot of people are nowadays.
But you can't. You're not, though. I don't care if you live in a crystalline palace in Seoul,
This
South
isn't
Korea.
real. It's pretty, but it's not.
Or in the middle of the moat in downtown Manhattan. You are still nature. You're a biological being. So you are in nature whether you like it or not. So we are not looking at the aquarium. We're the fish in the water trying to explain the water.
Right.
And the fish who knows nothing but the water. So this idea that nature is this other thing that we can go play with is full stop from the beginning wrong. You are nature. You are part of it. You are part and parcel of it. You are not separable from it. We have not reached that singularity yet. Maybe one day we will, who knows? But we're not there yet. And so these conversations annoy me when I hear witches talking about well, I'm a witch who just really loves nature. And I'm like, that's everything, Debbie. Like the cosmos is literally all, right? So, that's one thing I think we have to keep in mind. We are nature. We are nature.
And it controls us much more than we're willing to admit.
In New Orleans, I think we have a good sense of that in New
right.
Orleans.
Our body, our cells, the air we breathe, where we get our food, how it's grown. It's integral. I agree. We intellectually distance ourselves, but at a great disservice. I think we need to be thinking every morning, I'm part of this world.
It is.
How do I function the best? How do I help everything around me?
And Brian and I have had a conversation before about one of the things I love, particularly about Alexandrian witchcraft, is I think that our tradition bridges a gap that I think some traditions just don't understand, which is some traditions are entirely too cosmic and mental. A lot of magician-based traditions are like this. They're all about the third G. They're all in the head. It's all, it's very Jungian. It's all archetypal. Then you have a lot of neo-pagans who are so tied to earth, hard polytheists, the spirits are in the tree, they're really real. If I eat this specific herb on this specific day, whatever will happen. What I love about our tradition is I do think we span the gap where we are a religion of as above, so below. Our gods are cosmic, but our tradition is also earthly. We are sort of linked in both worlds, where we understand that we are experiencing Kether and sort of the Ein Sof hour, the creative light, the one, but only through the flesh. This is why we draw down the moon. This is why we have gods who are incarnate in a very real way. So we have the divine and the cosmic, but infleshed, right? And I think witchcraft is a really powerful religious path towards the mysteries for understanding that, because you get both. We are going to talk to God today, but only in a body,
So it's actually, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story that I don't think that Ellie and Levi even know about me. They might, because I've spoken about it before, but I mostly grew up in the country. I didn't really move full-time into a city until I was, I think, like 11, 12 years old. So I have all my childhood memories. We had horses. We lived in very rural places. At one point in time on a mountain, another time this very beautiful mountain. So I grew up with nature being all around me. And one of my first recollections of a spiritual experience was I felt depressed. And I was sitting outside as a kid, looking into the fields. And I felt like the real world was somewhere behind those fields. And I felt like I didn't belong where I was. And I was sad that I couldn't find my way back into the... I definitely, started practicing witchcraft when I was 15 consciously, religious witchcraft as well as operative witchcraft. And, operative witchcraft actually hit about 13. Religious witchcraft started to hit about 15 with Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft. I was like, oh, there's a goddess. But nature was always very much tied into that. So it has always been tied into my personal cosmology of the craft, I guess you could say. I very much tied into those things. I remember I must have been this was before my first degree initiation. And I was preparing for that. And I was staying with my aunt and her new husband. So he was my uncle by marriage. He was, don't want to get off the trail with that story, but he was an apple farmer. And his father had been an apple farmer. And he was very respectful of witchcraft because supposedly it had been in his family. That's a different story. Don't want to get into it. He wasn't a witch. He was not an occultist. He was an apple farmer. But he had asked me to bless his apple orchard. And so I did. I went out there and quite honestly, I worked with the she and I had made this ointment and I had made consecrations and I did a circle out there and I blessed the apple orchard. I wasn't an initiate yet. I was preparing for initiation, so I was on the path. Well, it was about a year later I get this, my aunt, what did you do to those trees? What do you mean? I thought maybe something foul had gone on. He says in all his life as an apple farmer, he's never seen trees bear fruit so young. What did you do to those trees? And I just sort of giggled, it's magic. It wasn't me, it was the fairies. I don't know. The blessing took, there is this side of the craft that we say we're a fertility cult, and fertility is about growing and living and thriving, and it's all around us. We are in a world that's very separated from nature. It's destructive. We build walls. We live in man-made vessels. We're not natural creatures. There's a lot about us that has become destructive. And I think that's what Ellie was talking about. There's this journey backwards. You could also see it in the Victorian era with the poetry and the romantic pan in the English countryside.
And the butterfly collectors.
Because they were all
and the
living
rose
in
gardeners,
smog-filled London. There was desire to get back. And I think that is one of the big works of modern witchcraft. But I'm also of the mind that the ancient world did not think that way. Because they didn't need it.
Right.
No.
They were just in it. They were actually quite wasteful, but they weren't destructive on the level that we were because they didn't have the opportunity to be so.
Exactly.
Usually, there's that island that destroyed everything and built the big rock heads. So it did happen. They were consumers,
Easter
but they
Island.
yes,
Yes.
Easter Island. Thank
But
you.
technology is what changed
Right.
things.
So I've got two minds about this. I don't think witchcraft is, inherently just a nature religion. I don't think it's that, but it's also not that. I think that's a very modern spin on it and one that's very much needed. But I think magic is essentially tied into nature. Why do you think even the smuggest magicians use the 4 elements of nature? Because it is the root of power.
Yeah.
All life and all power and all fertility comes from this planet. And we've evolved in that sense of witches that we now know it. Any magical person or witch on the planet should be working very strongly right now for the bees, and for other essential creatures and life forms. The bees and the
Environmentalism.
trees and the rivers, and we should be working for that. And it's something we should now be conscious of. But I don't have this fantasy that, our ancestors were living like magical elves, because
No.
they didn't think about. So there are circumstances, and being long-winded, cutting myself off. The Celts were really weird about certain trees and groves and things like
the
that.
sacred
The
walls.
Irish were, they'd have trees they cherished, but even then, if one clan wanted to offend another, they'd sneak in and cut the tree down. Because that was a huge offense.
That was the
But
offense, yeah.
Anyway, questions. Do we have any online? Or?
One person had asked one, maybe Ellie would be really good to ask this, is they were talking about how they cannot keep plants alive to save their life. Like, obviously not a green thumb.
Not if they're in the house.
Do you think some people are energetically predisposed to just be bad at that? Like they're just,
Yes.
or do you think it's just technique?
Yes.
Yes, some of us are meant to blight the crops.
Well,
I
you
do
heard it
think-
from Brian.
I think
Yes,
we
you just have that
different
ability.
skills. I think we have different skills. Some people are naturally good with plants. Some people are naturally
But
good
I
with
was
animals.
involved in that apple tree
You
thing.
did a good job.
But
that
I've never
day.
been good at plants in the house.
I don't have plants in my house either. I don't know.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to put plants inside. The poor things are like, please put us back
Yeah.
outside. It's good for the air. It is a nice feeling when you have some plants
Yeah,
inside.
living things in the house are nice.
What I have a question for both of you. There's a big trend, or there has been. It seems to be waning now, of the city witch and the urban shamanism. I haven't read those books, but there was a trend to make it okay to practice the occult arts in a city and in buildings, and that you did not have to participate in nature.
So far that I've even seen things like techno shamanism, where
Right.
it's like working through the internet.
Right.
You know
Oh,
what
I
mean?
don't
Like, as a medium.
think-
So where does that fit into?
Well, let's look at the tradition that we practice, right? In the liturgy, it has things that very much say, "I am the soul of nature.
Yep.
I am the green earth and the white womb." So, the elements. It is a part of our egregore. It is. So I don't think you can practice witchcraft and be disconnected from nature, especially nowadays. We are city witches. We live in a city.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, I think you have to have that. It's all fine and well.
I would go a little further, because I think one of the things you might be seeing a lot of now is there's a huge movement of transhumanism and very intense, sort of speculative philosophy about us eventually getting to the point of being AI, of detaching ourselves from biological necessity. There's a ton of dystopian fiction about this right now, and some of it might not become fiction in the long run. And there are some occultists, if they're, chaos magicians in particular, love to play around with this online, I've noticed.
Anyone who calls themselves a chaos magician is not really an occultist.
You know what I mean, though. Like,
no, I do know what you mean.
there are lots
I'm
of
just
those
throwing
types,
some
right?
super shade.
And they seem to
No such
really
thing.
almost like long for the day where we're cyborgs. And
Yeah.
that is a valid, I will say one thing. You could make a strong magical argument for that. Like, I'm going to put myself above the throne of God. I'm going to be a golem. I'm going to be beyond, this petty life and death or whatever. I think
Try fitting a goddess into that conversation.
Exactly. That's the problem, is it's secular, and they don't realize that. I think those philosophies only work if you don't recognize the numinous, the monad, the divine, and we do.
Even, let's use Athena as an example. This was a goddess of a city. There's no doubt about it. I love Athena. I loved Athens. This is a goddess of a city. But she was always depicted with an owl, a serpent, and a bee. Nature was always there in the image somewhere.
Yeah.
And she gave the Athenians what? The olive tree.
Yeah, which
So
is their
there's
major crop.
always this connection with nature, even with this goddess of the cities. I think that's very ugly, that kind of idea, and I think I think magic without nature is devoid of real power. I don't see in any tradition how it could possibly rise.
That's what I mean. I think that what we're practicing, to go to Ellie's point of seeing these new ideas pop up, I think they are antithetical to us. I don't think that they are this. Usually I can find a way to sort of say, oh, I can see my philosophy in yours. I honestly think it's a demarcating line. Like if you are divorcing, the craft from biology, and I mean that very specifically, from biology, from DNA, then there is a problem. We are a religion of, it is a mystery, I believe, a spiritual mystery that every living being shares the exact same proteins that build DNA, RNA, cell structure, like
tasty proteins,
delicious. But it builds a huge concept to me of this unity of life. That life, bios in Greek, is a sacred thing, and that it is a manifestation, a theophany in the world of the gods. And I think any rejection of that is a rejection of the divine.
All right, so I do want to tell you guys this. Miss Ellie here doesn't have a whole lot of time with us because she is a reader at the store and couldn't get full coverage, so we got her more than we wanted. But now is the time for questions. She is not only an accomplished witch, but she is a master herbalist. She probably doesn't think so, but I think she's a master herbalist, and she has worked with Paul Barrow and has an extensive amount of knowledge on the subject. So if you have any questions for Ellie,
Absolutely.
the next 15 minutes is the critical time because she might be leaving us.
We hope not.
Well, and what I want to say too about Levi's idea about how we function in nature. In Neoplatonic thought, there's the one, which is the life force.
Mm-hmm.
We could symbolize it in very simply as just saying the original power that runs through the cosmos.
There was Brian, and then there was Cain.
Or through the multiverse. And then that one diversified into the many to create matter, to create the known universe. And that includes our solar system, the galaxy, the millions of galaxies, infinite space, and probably multiple dimensions that we aren't able to perceive. And so we're part of that. We're part of the structure. We're necessary, as is every other, we'll answer that, as every other being in the multiverse and the cosmos, and that we honor the process of the one by being part of the system as we were designed to be.
Yeah.
And you might be saying that we're kind of taking ourselves out of that and saying, no, we're going to redesign ourselves into something different. We don't care what the rest of the world is doing. I just don't think it's going to work.
It's possible.
Did this happen in the Industrial Revolution, or was it long before?
Yeah.
Probably over and over.
When they built the ziggurat.
Yes.
So you do have a couple questions,
Okay.
Ellie. One of them is, well, first let's do an easy one. What was the name of your company one more time?
Allos Anthropos. It means other people. It's Greek for other kinds of people, and it references my interest in anthropology and artifacts.
And are we exclusive? I think we are.
You are.
So you get it through. She's a wholesaler for us.
But hexwitch.com. You can look it up, and you can see under the herbs section, you'll see herbs from a witch's garden, and then all the products that
they are
I
fantastic.
create are there.
And then here's a really nice, simple question that I like. Sapphire asks, what would be good to put in a witch's garden? What do you recommend? Maybe like a beginner, or sort of like the bare bones.
The first thing I think is so important are protective herbs.
Gotta have your red soldiers.
Rue,
Is that what they're called?
basil, holy basil, angelica, rosemary are protective boundary herbs. They clean the air, they keep energy in the space more healthy. And then, of course, I would always choose culinary because I want to go outside and snip a few things and come in and put it on my roast chicken. And then I would choose love herbs and mental calming herbs, lavender, valerian, vervain, skullcap, chamomile, sleeping. Some of my favorites are comfrey, and burdock is a fabulous root that is a wonderful love attractor. It takes about 2 years to get that plant to size, but I've just harvested some big burdocks and dried the root, and I'll be cutting them in little square pieces, and they'll go in the Venus blend or the love pocket fetish.
It's just plain old Lipton tea, rosemary.
The things that are easy, herbs like dry feet. They don't mind a sandy bottom. They don't have to have the richest soil. They often have a lot of oil content in them, and they can be annual or perennial. Some herbs die completely in the winter. Others live here. They live through the winter because it really still hasn't even frozen here this year. Often it freezes once. I picked 10 or 15 classics. Lavender's very hard to grow. Everyone wants to grow lavender. It doesn't do well in moist regions. It doesn't really do well in the south.
Can I give you a follow-up question with that?
St. John's wort.
The traditional cooking herbs don't kind of cover.
Perfect.
Yeah.
They are. They really
rosemary
are.
and
Basil, rosemary, thyme, oregano, mint, lemon balm.
I think that's why they became our traditional cooking herbs.
Sure.
You know, the good old English garden, really. Yeah.
I believe if you take a live plant in your hand, just cut a little piece of it, put it in your palm, just put it in your hand like that and sit with it. Don't tell it, just sit. It's going to start to change your emotions and give you its information about what its properties are. In this way, you can discover what planet rules it, and then by that, you can use it for the things that it would be associated with planetarily, like daisies and sunflowers are the sun. They're big, they're orange, they look like the sun. They're associated with a strong heart, health, the life force, producing children, financial success. If you sit with some sunflowers for 10 minutes, you're going to begin to feel or sense that. And I think that's how we originally learned what plants were for, by talking to them and knowing them. I'm a fan of simple. What we can eat, we can grow and use in our food and in our charm bags. Absolutely.
So I had a question. There have been some pretty high-profile cases historically in craft, not necessarily British traditional craft, but in just people practicing witchcraft and calling it that. And a lot of things online lately about baneful herb work.
Right.
You know, people have died from it.
Right.
You know, people making flying ointments and out of Jimson weed and things like that, and hallucinogens. I mean, I'm not talking about hallucinogens. It's a whole other topic that we might get into today, like psilocybin mushrooms and DMT and stuff and ayahuasca. But I'm talking about like Jimson weed, thornapple, Amanita muscaria, mandrake, toadstool, the stuff that basically belladonna poisoned you just enough to make you go crazy for a minute. Do you think there is validity in that? Do you recommend it?
Yeah, of course it was, because these people, you're asking her probably, right?
Well, all of us can weigh in on it.
It's pharmacy, right? It's ancient pharmacy. Poisons.
I mean, foxglove makes digitalis.
Right.
Foxglove can, I think if it's foxglove. I can't remember.
Too much of it.
It's either foxglove or hemlock that can actually counteract the other one. But then you have to do something else. But yeah, it's medicine, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And I think the problem...
A disclaimer.
Nobody
don't do it.
Right, no.
Don't drink a bunch of belladonna wine unless you know how to do it.
No, not unless you're trained by an herbalist. Everybody's chemistry is different. Your body weight matters. And there are combinations of herbs that slow heartbeat and respiration. And when you add those with a couple glasses of whiskey, your heart is going to stop, or you'll go unconscious, and then you'll stop breathing. I mean, that's how herbs mostly kill.
And let's be honest, certain herbs really are absolutely dangerously toxic.
They are.
I mean, we're not talking like rubbing Jimson weed into the skin
make
here,
you really sick.
But we're talking like henbane and aconite. I mean, these will kill you.
Yes.
Foxglove can make you have headaches and stuff from just handling it.
Well, foxglove makes digitalis, which is good. It was a medicine for a long time. Too much of it will stop your heart.
Right.
I love this follow-up question. Let me make sure I don't lose it. Yes, Sapphire said, okay, so talking about, oh no, it wasn't Sapphire. I'm so sorry. Katie, do you think there's a loss in the magic of herbs, Ellie, if you use newer modern extraction tools like making oils and baths, and how we're working with herbs now, the essential oil market, all of that?
Definitely. I've read recently a lot of discussions about the use of so many essential oils. When you think about how many roses it takes to make rose oil, it's tons of roses. I do think you lose something when you don't know the whole plant. The root, the leaves, the blossoms, the bark, the leafy material, each of those has a contributing constituency of elements or chemicals that is slightly different throughout the whole plant. They're often better to use the whole plant. Like a lot of herbalists don't do that anymore. They'll just use the root or the leaf that's been commonly used. Like the burdock root was always cut in little squares and strung on a red string, and you wore it in the spring and it attracted love. made everyone around you really horny, and they grabbed you and kissed you in the street. But I use the root, the leaf, and the little blossom because I believe the whole plant has a lot to contribute. And why not? Why would I throw part of it out? Even in soups and stews that you might not, like your rosemary stem.
Or your oxtail stew.
Put it in the broth. That's my father's oxtail stew. Put it in the broth. You can fish it out later if it's too woody. No, I'm a huge proponent of all the plant material.
So I've got a bit of a question for you, Ellie. In your gardening experience, do you ever work with divas or fairies or anything like spirits that have to do with the plants?
I do think that each plant has a spiritual being. I try to honor it and talk to it.
What do you call them?
No, I don't really use it that much. I use the planets. Hello, little Venus plants today. Aren't we all beautiful and covered in love? Hello, Jupiter plants. Thank you for making me so much money this week.
I mean,
we love her. This is why we can.
I'm really working, since I'm a Floridian and not from
Louisiana. So you don't ever encounter any sort of spectral...
And yes, and I see them as little flashing and moving lights. They're often very low to the ground. I particularly notice them in the spring and fall equinox. Halloween, that whole week is really strong for them. Columns, I see like the tree spirits or elemental beings as columns of shadow. I see the elemental beings more often than like individual plant beings. And in this city, this dirt, this water, I'm trying very hard to like go to the river and make offerings, dig in the dirt. It sounds silly, but it's really beautiful to just get out there and look and see what's in the ground. We have so many interesting things.
It's a very fertile place,
it's
really,
very
isn't
fertile.
it?
Yeah,
It's
nature takes over here in New Orleans. It's very hard to get away from.
State. I mean, it's just rich. It's the delta of the Mississippi.
Not the best for camping, though.
A little sticky, but I do like that idea about the genus loci, the spirit of place. You need to find your ground, and we've talked about this on our videos for Alexandrian witchcraft. It's born in England, that land, that special place.
That's our Haiti, really.
It is,
yeah.
but make sure, I think witches and magicians need to know their place and at least participate enough in the nature that's around them so they can work with the energies and use the powers that are there. We are born in this world.
Absolutely.
And yes, someone's asking, Juanita, I love wormwood. I grow a lot of wormwood. It's got those leggy arms. The stems look like curly worms. It's a bushy green plant.
Brian, get that absinthe away from him.
It's really great to put in vodka.
Is that what came to your mind?
I put it in vodka. We have brewed it and tried to make absinthe. It's pretty complicated for the liquor side of it. But
you can get it here, though.
We just chop it up and put it in vodka.
Hobbies, children.
We chop up some other things and put in vodka.
Again, not recommending any system in this video.
Small doses, and then take a sip. You can try something and see how you feel in 30 minutes. If you're feeling a little wonky, don't drink more of it.
There you go.
Right.
Disclaimer, again, do not try any of this.
No, and I do not
had a
sell
question,
any poisonous herbs in my magical
No,
products.
she just brings them over to my house and keeps them laying around.
Brian loves them.
So Sapphire wanted to know, do you feel that there's a way to prepare the soil in a magical sense? To charm the soil into helping the plants to grow?
I purchase from Josephine Porter Institute the Rudolf Steiner products, the 500, the 501. I won't go into how those products are made, but they contain a diverse amount of
now we all want to look
bacteria and living. What is it in our gut? It's not flora. It's flora in our gut.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so we create big compost piles with leaves and grass and all the clippings from our herbs. We add the 500 formula at certain times of the year. And then we buy organic soil, organic mushroom compost. We go to a farm outside of Pensacola and get a truckload of horse manure every year and some sand. And it depends. I look for different companies. There's 2 places here. I use Harold's and Renaissance Gardens to buy 50-pound bags of organic soil. I make big piles and blend them. I use the Rudolf Steiner additives. Follow the instructions. At certain times of years, you do different things. And then I cover that and let it breathe for about a month.
What do you think about women using their moon cycle?
I would add any of that you have access to. I think also we compost everything
Any of that
out of
you
our
have
kitchen.
access
Any
to.
of that you have
Yeah,
access to.
why not?
I mean, I would use, yes.
Now, spiritually, religiously, I also want to say that, in witchcraft, we do worship, fertility gods. And so the rites and the prayers and the consecrations to those spirits are anciently tied to the land. You can't pray to Demeter and make her a city god.
No.
You really can't. You can put her in as much plaster or marble as you can find, but really her whole story is about the growing grain and the ripening earth and all of that. So those gods that you work with, most witchcraft gods are intimately connected to nature in some way.
Yes.
That's just the truth. The more popular ones are really connected to nature.
And you're missing the experience of that incredible love and sensation when you are participating with the natural elements. They really have something to contribute.
And to keep it in that religious strain, we look at nature in all of its aspects and in a much larger scale than simply using herbalism or stones or whatever in magic. We live by the cycles because of the Sabbats. In traditional witchcraft, we have 8 Sabbats, and as you're living through them, you're experiencing psychological drama.
Right.
Agricultural drama.
Right.
Historically, it would have been agricultural drama, but even if
For
you're
us,
not in
not
the
so
fields
much.
anymore, it is still psychologically very, very important to start living in that cyclical nature. Many of us who come from Christendom, or the West in general, even if you were raised secular, are very linear. We have black and white thinking. We don't understand, return. We don't understand waiting. We are very impatient,
Right,
and
all
so
time moves forward.
all time moves
instead of
forward
making
towards a
cycles.
goal, and that's not true.
no.
Evolution doesn't work that way necessarily. It comes in different
I
stages.
have a modern thing to say what you just complimented, which I just discovered recently. It's actually a therapeutic concept coming out right now within the last few years that the human body, think about trauma is a good example. If you had trauma at a certain point of year, the human body remembers the time. And you may not know, but it comes
right.
up in that season for you
Right.
more profoundly.
That's right.
If you find, I found, this year I went into this little bit of a phase of I couldn't stop eating. And that's not really me. I'm very
It's
controlled.
not
And I was
right.
just I can't stop eating. And it was a past trauma coming up, I think. And it was me going to comfort food because it was coming up. But it was seasonal.
Right.
When you hear people talk about seasonal depression, we often make that about the sun. But sometimes it's actually about your body remembers the
Right.
time.
We live in
Right.
cycles.
We have clocks
Right.
in
We
our
have
bodies.
clocks. We live in a
Exactly
cycle.
right.
People who are night owls, for instance, I watched this whole program about it. If you find that you're someone who stays up late at night often, it's probably in your genetics. Because our ancestors actually had to have certain people in the tribe stay up at night to make sure everything was okay.
Right.
And that was passed on to certain people. They've proven that you've got kind of 2 time clocks in your body as far as sleep, and that there are certain individuals who are not actually meant to be awake all the time. They are meant to be late sleepers. And because society doesn't gear for them to be able to do that, it's actually extremely unhealthy for them, and there's nothing they can do to fix it. So it's really strange. But yeah, our bodies are...
And if you
like
detach
the
yourself from
Right.
those cycles,
Right.
you're detaching yourself from the psychological drama and power of teaching within them too. Because it teaches you, the more you do it, the repetition, the constant understanding, it gives you a very clear understanding of how to work towards something, how to lay a seed for something, how to wait, when to pick the appropriate time. And this extends far beyond the circle. This extends to choices you make in your career, your love life, everything. It teaches you how to be a better person because you're understanding cycles. You are tuned into something that is larger than yourself. And in doing so, it does change your psychology quite a bit. And I find that amongst witches. I find that a lot of my secular humanist friends are much more, quick to go to panic. They're much more quick to catastrophize, to use black and white thinking. And the reason is because time to them is solely linear. It's all rushing towards the great fires. And we don't think of it that way. So witchcraft is tied to nature in that way too, that nature's cyclical.
And by going through the seasons and the process of the year, you heal yourself.
Yes.
You
yes.
equilibrate your energies. You find balance. You you have respect for the time periods. Things begin to make sense in a broader way, and you trust and you believe and you have faith that next year I'm going to be able to get through this. if I keep practicing and working with my devotion, my prayer, my ritual, and I repeat the patterns, they are going to get stronger and better, and they're going to influence me
Discipline.
in a better way. And I will become more and more successful, happy, and well over time.
When you do a Halloween ritual within our tradition, or probably any tradition, what's the biggest thing in your recollection is the last Halloween ritual.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
because it builds, and
Right.
back to what Levi's saying, the time has become a circle, because it's like it happened yesterday, because you're in the same place again, but you're not. You know, I don't know.
I think it
Right.
actually
No,
changes
you
our
are.
psychology. In a
It's
very
all
real
quantum
way.
I do
physics,
too.
Levi.
Ooh.
I read lots of books on it.
Oh my God.
Never
And
read the book
I
on
just want
quantum.
to interrupt too and say I see some really specific questions in the lineup about
Yes,
plants.
let's ask questions.
If I don't answer it, you can email me at alosanthroposneworleans@gmail.com or go to my website, alosanthropos.com, and send me a message. I will look up your question and answer you. I answer everyone.
She also
Fan
gives
mail.
readings, and you can establish them here. But let's answer the questions, shall we?
So there was one that what I thought interesting was, what 3 pieces of essential beginner advice would you give to someone first starting out with using herbs and plants and magic, if you could narrow it down to 3 big ones?
You go first.
Okay, definitely try to grow in a pot or your yard your plant from seed to maturity, just to begin to understand the life cycle of the plant, the process. Put your energy into it. Talk to the plant. Pray to the plant. I put crystals and little gifts and trinkets out in my yard and places. I make food and flour and wine offerings actually in the gardens. I thank them for their service, and I give offerings to them to keep them on my side, primarily to keep them on my side. Grow the plant yourself. I think it's good to carry an herb. Why don't you start with just letting it, cut a few twigs of it, put it on a paper plate or a paper towel in a well-ventilated room, but with sunlight. Let it dry for a week. Don't cut it up. Put it, fold it over, and put it in a little cloth and start carrying it in your pocket. See how it influences you. See how it flavors your experience. See how it changes your emotions. And then I might try a combination. Choose 2 plants and put those together and see how they operate together. Do they feel good? Are they friends? Are they beneficial? And very slowly add an herb a week. Read about it. Buy it dried or grow it if you can. Use it. Put it in your hands. Put it in your pocket. And then you can do more advanced magical spells. I do a lot of charm bags. I do a lot of candle magic where I put herbs on my altar and interspersed with my candles, and maybe treat the herb by grinding it and making a tincture and drinking it, or rubbing it on things.
Most people, I think,
Rub it on things.
most people,
Like
I
Levi.
think, they treat herbs the same way they treat anything else that they first come into. It's kind of a magical correspondence.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're really interested in really exploring the craft of herb, I agree with Ellie that if that's your thing, it's not everyone's thing. It's fine. We're
Right.
all going to work with
Right.
herbs, though, even if it's just in the kitchen.
Right.
Is to know the whole plant. So I always recommend to people, or I always recommend to my students, select just a few to start out with.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 3, maybe 7, maybe 9, whatever you think you can take on, and really learn how to identify them, grow them, understand the whole plant, understand their season. For me, I really got into, probably because of my initial tutelage, the Ogham trees. And of course, I didn't grow Ogham trees.
Right.
We did try planting them, but they're trees, so it's a thing. But where I first grew up, all of the Celtic trees, other than hazel, were very prevalent there. So I got to know, how they bloom in the seasons and where they fit into, the modern Celtic calendar, because I don't know if it's really, but that sort of thing. So it really does connect you to the spirit of those entities. So that's my recommendation. You don't need. There's a woman named Susan Weed.
Right.
And she did a
Right.
great video I watched years ago, and that was her recommendation was,
Right.
if you know 5 herbs really well, you probably know more about herbs than somebody who knows the whole list.
Right.
So work with what you're going to work with. You only need one love herb. Think about it.
Right.
You only need one love herb. You only need one protection herb. And I was trying to say earlier about the witch's garden, I think they were called, I know I'm saying it wrong, red soldiers. It was an old witch thing about these red flowers.
I don't know that. They could be cardinal flower.
Witches soldiers, that's what it was.
I will have to look that up.
Most people think they're geraniums, red geraniums. So I do like geraniums.
Because they were a guardian?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
It was supposed to be a guardian. Yeah. I don't know. Random thoughts. I know a lot about herbs because I obsessively studied everything about witchcraft, but it does really come out to more of a correspondence. Knowing a bunch of stuff isn't the same thing as working with it.
Yeah, no.
So why I would not consider myself a master herbalist is I might be able to identify some things, like I could get mint or maybe comfrey or chamomile, things like that. But a lot of plants I wouldn't be able to identify. And it's been many years for me to be able to identify the ones I can. Being around witches like this one, that's
It would
why.
come quickly once you started doing it. It's so much faster.
I can't grow them in a garden, though. I think it's because I've never really gotten into it.
You could if you wanted to, Brian.
Maybe I just
You'd
don't.
be fine. And a lot of people
Dirty
don't
fingernails,
have, have time for it. It does take some room and it takes some
I
effort.
don't
And,
have room.
and you can't abandon your plants. If it hasn't rained, you have to go out there and water.
I can blight your crops, though, so don't mess with me.
Don't blight my crops.
I won't blight your crops. I make a lot of money.
I know, I was going to say, you make money off my crops. Don't blight
Levi,
them.
you, herbs.
What I would like to say about herbs is because we are talking about how some witches are going to love herbalism, some people are not. And I feel like there's almost a guilt as a witch if you're not the greatest herbalist. And
I don't have much guilt in my life.
Well, you don't have guilt at all. You're a horrible person. But it's
I think
guilt
this may be
either.
projection, my friend.
It is not.
I don't have guilt either.
No.
What does that say about
What
me?
I always tell people, because I'm joking, guys, Jesus, don't read into this. Like, I was just kidding. I was saying a lot of witches think that is you have to be able to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
By a lot of witches, do you mean you?
No, I mean pick up any book on witchcraft and half of the book is an herbal.
There's no philosophy about herbs, Levi, so give it your best shot.
What I was going to say is, before I was so rudely sidetracked by these queens.
He provoked me, you guys.
I provoked
You saw it
nothing. Is
I'm the nicest priest you'll ever meet.
That says something about a religion. No, he's a very good priest, very nice priest. But the
Good
point,
and nice are not the same thing.
the point is I think that even if you're working with them in ways, like if you're not, okay, for example, like me, I'm not a big fan of alternative medicine. I'm not going to make poultices out of things and essential oils and rub them on my wounds. I am not, it's just not my journey in this lifetime, shall we say. But I will still say herbs still do affect my witchcraft. We use certain herbs in ritual, for example. And to this day, because of that repetition, because of that powerful psychological connection, the smell of them, even outside of circle, will trigger me immediately. My mind
Talking
will
about the 9
flood.
sacred herbs.
That's right.
My memory
I'm
will
not going
flood.
to tell you what they are.
But my memory will flood with images.
Think about our incense, though.
Or the
different
incense,
blends we
right?
make for
Certain blends we
infusible
make.
light. As soon as you
It
smell
does
that,
affect
it brings
me.
all of that.
Right?
Yeah, there's no getting away. If you're
You
in
can't.
witchcraft or magic, you're going to be exposed
So I'm
to
saying that's
plants.
what you can, if you're not going to be growing a garden or whatever, you can still interact with
Why
herbs
don't we
and
move
have a
on to
powerful connection.
Stones a little bit. What do you think about crystals, Levi, and stones? How does that
Yeah, I was
fit
going to
into
say
your...
nature and
Because nature's more than
Using
just
stones?
and
plants.
let's,
Yeah.
let's
Can we ask
Animals,
this last?
if we have
Somebody
time.
asked one good last question, and then I think we can move on. What about smoking cannabis for astral travel or transworking?
Can I answer that question? You can
Of
too.
course.
Just because I have immediate thoughts about it. It has been done. In Alexandrian witchcraft, we tend to use wine. We like things that are not too strong, because we don't want to, you can use shrooms, you can use these things that are going to alter the mind and project them, but they don't teach discipline. If people have just a little wine, it gives them a bit of an idea of what an altered state is, but it doesn't really bring them fully there. They've got to do the work themselves. Cannabis, marijuana, it can, but it won't teach someone the mechanics that they need to be able to do it on their own. It's kind of like falling asleep with or without Benadryl. So Benadryl will help you fall asleep, but you don't really need Benadryl to sleep. And if you use Benadryl all the time to sleep, it might make it harder for you to sleep when you don't use it. I also would say it really depends on whether you use it mundanely or not. You know,
Is it more
I
sacred?
have a tolerance to wine like some people might have developed from snake venom. So I can't really say it affects my magic one way or the other, you know. But for someone who doesn't drink, it can be a useful tool. For me, it's just something that I'm naturally resistant to. So, you know, it's fun for me. It's joy for me. It's celebration. And a little bit goes a long ways. But, you know, smoking, if you smoke marijuana all the time, it's probably not going to benefit you magically. I will admit here on the air that I did at one point in time, well, of course I've smoked marijuana before, but I did at one point in time kind of have a little bit of a spiritual thing with marijuana, but it was through creative processes. And I do think it helped me clean out my brain a little bit and open some things up. But I didn't habitually use it. And it wasn't something that I was, you know, strongly attached to. And it makes you fat if you're not careful. You know, at least it would me.
Here's what I'd like to say about it, too. There's many strains of cannabis. It's not just one plant. Oh, it's one plant, but there are many types of it with different qualities and chemistry. Everyone is going to affect you differently. And because it's not legal, still in the U.S. and most states. I think it is, as we've said about the other herbs, it's important to know the specific plant that you might want to work with, to have a very reputable organic source for that plant. And I think typically smoking is a little bit harder on us. What I would do to experiment with it would be take a teaspoon, ground up, and put it in a glass of wine and leave it for a week, and then have a few sips of the wine and wait 30 minutes, and then maybe a few sips more, and document your experience.
I was toking
kind
and
of,
drinking and
right,
toking and drinking.
Another strain, indica, sativa. These are going to cause, sometimes people say, well, I like the marijuana where I'm excited and creative and energetic. That's a particular kind of it. I like the marijuana that makes me sleepy and relaxed and takes away my anxiety. That's another type of it. So without knowing those things, you should probably really read more about it and learn.
And plants have evolved from medieval times.
We have
the strains we have, like they say, chamomile that we have now is not really the chamomile that they were using.
We've GMO'd a lot of plants, so we've altered them over the centuries. So
you can't grow a banana. Did anyone know that? There's no such thing. If human beings went extinct, there's no more bananas. Because they're all grafted, there's no seeds they don't have, it's a grafting process now. It's the only way they exist is because we keep grafting them. And they do not taste like the bananas our grandparents used. That strong banana flavor you get with some candies or in the dentist, that's a real banana flavor, which if you notice doesn't really taste like bananas. That flavor doesn't exist anymore because it's now a human thing.
Wow.
Now, the little plantains and things like that are related to them, you could still get those.
But the traditional yellow bananas
taste
that we
more.
know.
Yeah, they're already extinct. They're kept alive by grafting. You know, so.
I didn't know that.
I didn't for a long time either.
I have lots of banana
the
plants
little
in my
seeds
yard.
you see inside of the banana that you eat.
Right, no, that doesn't
They're not
produce a banana.
fertile.
Right.
But it did at one point in time.
Wow.
They don't produce seeds.
We've actually...
They're sterile fruits.
Yep.
And they now have a permanent relationship with humanity.
We have the decorative
Interesting.
bananas, and we have enough warm weather that they've gotten yellow, and we've eaten them, but they're not very sweet.
Yeah, they're not the bananas that you would commercially buy, which is what Brian's talking
The
about.
plantains are probably closer in flavor.
So
I don't really know if I know what a plantain tastes like, so I could be wrong. You probably
Yes,
do.
true bananas only exist in baby food.
Yeah.
Baby food. I can't even go down the baby aisle. I don't like the smell of babies. Not at all.
Not even when they're roasting.
We're dispelling the fact that without orange sauce, witches do not consume babies.
Right. And I have a child. I love her, but I'm not into babies. What else should we talk
There were
about?
covens in Europe. That's what they're called. The congregation.
It
Covens
was
in
called
Europe, in
for-
America,
It
and
was
in Australia,
called
and they have one
I
right
don't
here.
think they heard
That
the
whole
original
bunch.
ones.
The parties with the singing and the flute and the chanting. Those are espeths or Sabbaths or
Honey,
whatever
don't get
they're called.
excited, huh?
Read what they do,
Do you have
God.
any more questions?
They use blood in their rituals, and the blood that has the
can move
most
on to
power is
rocks if you
baby's
want.
blood.
Rocks. Yes, let's talk about rocks. So nature. Okay, so nature comprises a whole lot of things, including our own bodies. You know, witches often work nude, and we do that. People say for some, it's so the power can get through. or O, so that everyone feels the same. Well, I'm not saying these things aren't true, but honestly, I think that the biggest thing about being naked is there's no barrier between you and nature. Like we've talked about barriers today, you know, the house, the clothing. When you're working an outside ritual, which we don't get to do too much in New Orleans, we're working on that, but like I said, it's not the best place for camping. But where I come from in the Northwest, we did a lot of camping and we did a lot of outside rituals. In fact, I was in one coven that all the rituals were outside for many, many years. And there's no barrier between you and nature, and that it's psychological feeling on one level,
No
but it really does connect you.
From your mind,
you know,
to your
wind is on your whole body, the sun and the moon is on your whole body, you know, the wind is on your whole body. There's no illusion or barrier. And I think, my own thing, it's a real act of freedom to have that feeling. And I believe that's the most spiritual reason for being naked. Crystals are a really big thing right now.
Yes, they are.
So
they have been for a while.
my quick thoughts on crystals. There is folklore that has little stones and things like that. You know, the amethyst will keep you from getting drunk. Or was it the garnet? I don't remember. You know, all these different things. I think it might be the garnet.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't know stone theory.
fairy stones, fairy rings, the whole stones.
Right.
Hagstones.
Hagstones, thank you. You know, all these different, there are, you know, obviously we've got stone circles throughout all of Europe. In fact, quartz crystals have been linked to actual Celtic circles, and I think it had something to do with the moon. I'm not talking about Stonehenge, but actual Celtic circles that they have found that are stones made by the Celts. They know this, you know, we now can tell, you know, what culture or non-known culture it is. And they found quartz crystals or crushed up crystals that have nothing to do with the stone circle. So they think it had something to do with the moon. For me as a practitioner, I think crystals are, to me, it's color magic and they're vehicles of light. Obviously the earth mineral is there. So I kind of use it in those sort of ways, but I am not obsessed with it. You know, if it's not a piece of jewelry, it's probably not entering into my magic unless it is a particular folklore piece or it's going to go into some sort of bag or something.
Or if it's part of like the system, like in the grimoires where it's like you use lapis lazuli and the specific pentacle and, you know, citrine or whatever.
But some people make all their magic about crystals, but that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah.
I don't think crystals are witchcraft, but I don't think they're not witchcraft. You know, it became a fad. They're pretty. They're beautiful.
They're beautiful. I would say
they are from the earth, you know, deep in the earth. It is the real earth element, cold and lacking anything else. Right. Nothing has pure earth like a crystal or a piece of sand because it's absent of the other elements in a way. You know, air is somewhere in some things, but you know, that's enough from me. Ellie, crystals.
I also don't use a lot of stones and crystals. I have done a lot of digging and rock hounding and have collected my own things from like mountain hikes and things. I have a few things here from the shop, sodalite and onyx and obsidian I use for grounding and emotional stability, just because I see so many people a week here as a reader and I need to stay grounded and centered myself. I have a few collected quartz crystals and stones that I find beautiful. They're on my altar because they're aesthetically attractive to me. Oh, okay, and that's it. I also feel like we're doing too much mining. We're digging everything up.
They're not sustainable.
These days, they're creating crystals out of powderizing rock, reforming them in a factory, and giving you this really pretty chunk of something colored. I wouldn't use any of that.
You know, we are approaching 8:30. If you want to like do like a final thing, she could make it.
Yes. And then I can go back to work.
Okay. No, because we were really short. We've got plenty of time, so let's let her go.
But let me say one more thing.
Ellie, say goodbye.
Goodbye. I love you all. Thank you for coming to Hex and watching Covendom. It's a wonderful show. Email me at alosanthroposneworleans@gmail.com if I can answer other plant questions for you. And pitching myself again. February 6th, I'm teaching a class at Hex, Introduction to Using Tarot as a Divination System. That's at Eventbrite. And on February 20th, Introduction to Palm Reading. And I'm a medical palmist. I do palm reading for analysis of your body and brain. It's the modern way of doing hand analysis. That's going to be a good hands-on intro class. please sign up for either of those live and come work with me in person, or just like tonight, sign up and get your ticket and be with us online, and then you can type in questions and we can act and respond that way. Blessed be.
And we will have her on again because we really enjoyed this.
I'm so excited.
Sorry that the cut there, but we're going to let Ellie go and we're going to do some more questions and go from there. So I'm going to try to just.
So much, Ellie.
This is because she's so dedicated that she is doing readings. I can get out of here. Probably not. I'm taking this off.
Don't tell I had wine while I was here.
Never.
Ellie, I'm the boss.
It's Diet Coke.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
always Diet
I'm
Coke.
best friends with the boss.
Hey everybody, it's just me here now. I shouldn't let them come back.
No, you'd love that. The
I would.
Levi hour.
I would.
Just Jack. Just Jack.
It's
Remember
just
that?
Jack.
Do you remember
It's
that?
just Jack.
You're probably too young.
Oh God. Jorge says Happy New Moon. Happy New Moon.
Jorge.
Hola, bienvenidos.
All right, everyone. So Levi and I actually are going to be going tonight to meet. We're going to have a little meet with
devil.
some people interested in Alexandrian witchcraft. But we, want to sort of summarize the show. I didn't want to take too much time from Ellie because she was really the most knowledgeable person here on herbs, and things like that. She has a great garden, and she is a very powerful, disciplined Alexandrian priestess. Alexandrian priesthood doesn't usually say that about themselves, usually. But, some do. But no, she is. She's a great occultist, and she's had lots of experience, and she's just been a great magical blessing for everyone in the
Absolutely.
coven. I said about everyone in the coven, but I do adore Ellie. So without going into that anymore, let's talk a little bit let's go into the dark side of this. Where is it become perhaps fantasy that witchcraft is a nature religion? Like, where is the fantasy there?
Oh, I could say a lot about this. I think there's a huge fantasy right now of middle class, sort of liberal minded people who want to make a difference, which I think is sweet, and I think it's born in a good place, but they make their entire being around policing sort of environmental choices of other people and whatnot. And what they don't realize is it has to be systematic. So, barking at somebody about a plastic straw really does nothing, at the level of corporate pollution.
We had a covener, Austin, that was his complaining. What do they think the straws are going to do?
Yeah, well, you know what I mean? So I do think there's this weird individualistic,
and I'm like, what's the straw thing?
Like libertarian almost mentality of, I am responsible for every environmental sin. It's almost become a religion. And so every now and then I'm like, let's not.
My hair does look better now that it's gotten some.
Yeah, let's not make that a thing. So I do think that can be the dark side too, where it becomes almost this hyper vigilant,
Blonde
individualistic
bombshell.
salvation thing.
Me and Ellie are blonde bombshells.
You and Ellie are blonde bombshells. I am not. I'm bald.
You're a bald bombshell.
Thank you. The Boss Witch, who just made a comment, they collect their quartz crystals out of the river that runs by the Applewood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Been there many, many times.
I really like
It's
quartz.
kinda
It's
cool.
probably my favorite crystal.
And yes, Jorge, she was trained in the SOL, Servants of the Light.
Rubies I love. There's this sort of idea, I think, that was going around for a long time, and really the environmental movement, the feminist movement, these have all been tied into witchcraft. Early on, and I hope I don't misspeak this historically, but there was a movement and I might be misspeaking this, so I'm going to give that disclaimer, but this is my memory. There was a movement in England that was an environmental yet political movement called Greencraft. And somehow it was tied into witchcraft. I'm not really sure how that works. I can't speak on that. And the reason this comes up in my mind is because I think I mentioned I was contacted by someone who claimed to be Alexandrian, who said they were from the Greencraft line. And of course I instantly was like, okay, you're in America and I've written an entire book about this. I've never heard of a Greencraft line. Not to mention, Alexandrians don't call their lines things like that.
No.
It's usually named after, a person or something.
Coven, yeah.
It's not named after something like that. There wouldn't be a craft. It just doesn't make sense. It sounded alien. But being respectful, I looked into it, and I was told that there was this movement in England. I don't know if these two things are connected. There's a book called Green
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
so
But
who
that's
knows?
different. That's
Well, you don't know that this person just didn't read that, or somebody in their line did. But it was an environmental movement, and Alex and Maxine did not, or Alex in particular, did not want his initiates involving the craft in politics. And that was something to be avoided. Environmentalism, however, is about caring for the world around us and being healers. I think that's a natural vocation for a witch.
I do
So it's sort of a fine line there. Do I think the Druids were environmentalists? No, I don't. I think they saw sacredness in nature, and so they also lived in harmony with nature.
Yeah.
So by proxy they were, but do I think it was a part of their thought process? Not the way we talk about it.
It's a modernism, yeah. It's something that comes in the modern world.
But it's a great tool for modern problems, and so I think that witchcraft being a champion for environmentalism or for feminism and that sort of equal rights, freedom, fantastic. I'm all for it. Do I think it's inherently the core of the tradition in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s? No. I think that the power behind it was a great vehicle for it.
Yeah, it's a tool.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that completely. And I mean, there's lots of traditions that are much more forthright about their politics. Boswitch is mentioning reclaiming tradition, and Starhawk, very true. There was Feraferia, which was a big
because
thing.
In America, feminism also tied into witchcraft and environmentalism.
It did.
And we first get it with the Flower Children, which is very connected to Alexandrian witchcraft. So these things do tie in together. They do intersect.
They do.
In ways.
And I think environmentalism.
And we're certainly not opposed.
And in the modern world, I do think, like, for example, if you are just going to be a out and out grotesque polluter and not care about the earth, witchcraft's probably not the religion for you. You know what I mean? I think we can say that pretty flatly.
Probably not. There is a respect that goes on there for human beings and for life. In our liturgy, the goddess is expressed as nature.
But yeah,
the god is usually seen as a manifestation of nature, whether it's an animal or the growing grain. He is a manifestation of her. So they are intimately connected with nature deities. Pan, Diana. These gods that we work with are connected to the woods, rural places.
of course.
There's the agricultural gods. Bacchus or Dionysus or Demeter, Isis, the Nile, the annual flooding. It's all very much connected to nature. There's no separation there because the god and the goddess are seen as nature. The oak tree is the god. That is a thing. As a witch, I could never cut down an oak tree.
It would feel wrong.
Just couldn't do it.
No. And I mean, we are a natural religion. We're not, what I would say is we are not a movement for that, though. We are just the sacredness
spiritual
of...
catalyst, perhaps?
Yeah, spiritual catalyst.
Yeah.
But the spiritual nature of... it's so hard not to repeat yourself a lot when you're talking about this because the word nature, the word spiritual, like they keep knitting themselves back together in 1,000 different ways. But here's what I'm going to say. In many religious philosophies, God is transcendent to nature. He is not in it. It is a very strict dichotomy between creator or creatrix and the created. We don't believe that. God is in nature and above it too, actually. He is the one, the monad, the thing that is outside of it, but she is also nature. She may be the monad that has no connection to this natural world and is so far beyond fathomability that it has nothing to do with seeds and trees and whatnot. But she is also immanent within it, right? Our God is an immanent God. Our God is not a God that is separable from that biological reality. And so it's as above, so below. They are knit together in a beautiful cycle, and witchcraft really sort of lives that out.
I don't believe you could... I think that weather magic is a real thing. I don't think you could believe in magic and not believe that the weather...
For the watcher,
can be
somebody
affected.
asked about this.
It is. It sounds fantastic. But no, of course it is. It's already a natural cycle. It's already something that exists. It does happen on its own. Of course, there could be coincidences, but based on my own personal experience, I have seen it work, or I believe I've seen it work, to be skeptical. And I think that the mathematical probability of what I saw proved to me that it does work. However, when you're working with something that's in a huge space, there could be many influences. So, it's hard to say the winds of the wise. But yeah, of course I do. I think that the entire cycle of planet and life and, why could you use magic to get a job but not use magic to get it to rain? Yes, I do believe in weather magic.
I do too. I will say that I do believe that magic that is trying to affect, there's a difference between magic that is trying to affect the psyche versus magic that is trying to affect the physical world. I do think there are different kinds of
I'm
magic.
going to give you a story that's going to make me sound like a crackpot here on the air. I was, I have told this story before, but not too often publicly. I think I was probably about 16, 17, maybe 18, I don't know. I was still a teenager, still living with my parents, and I had told some other witches that I was going to make it rain, And it was a clear sunny day. I had not looked at the Weather Channel. I had not done anything to the sort. And I went out into the yard, and I had a cauldron, and I'd filled it with water, and I had a broom. And I stirred it, and I flicked it, and I stirred it, and I flicked it into the sky, something I dread, witches did. I did this for about an hour.
Hobbies, children.
And this was in June. A very small rain cloud. Like, this is almost comical, and it is true, and I did have a witness. A very small rain cloud passed over me for just moments and rained on me. It wasn't enough to actually affect the entire city. And to be honest with you, to this day, I've never seen such a small rain cloud. To what Levi's saying, there could be lots of influences, perhaps my sheer determination or some being or whatever you want to say made this little cartoon character rain cloud come across and rain on me for just a minute to say, okay, we've heard you, piss off now, you're not getting a tempest. But no, I do believe in it. I believe magic can. I believe you cannot believe in magic and its ability to create change without really believing in it. But I do believe that there are many influences. So there you have it. What if 10 magicians were practicing for different things that day in the sky? Who wins? I think there are those things to think about. And I'm certainly not trying to create a you must believe fantasy, because I understand the skeptic. But I did see that myself, and I've never seen such a small rain cloud in my life before or since.
So Zach said...
And the sky remained clear and blue.
I mean, I'm here for that story. Zach says that witchcraft shares a commonality with Shinto, that the kami, the gods, are actually in nature. And I'll expand on that a little bit, because it's a good point. I do think that there are certain religious traditions, ourselves amongst them, who have a very specific view of what God is. And then there are certain religious philosophies historically that don't really sort of work with our philosophy very well. So, like, if you believe that the creation is completely and utterly separable from the creator, that's problematic to us. That dichotomy does not really exist, right? The divinity is infused within all of it. This is common in Hindu philosophy, the concept that everything is the Brahman. There is nothing that is not Brahman, right? In Hindu philosophy. The eternal dance of Shakti and Shiva in tantric versions of that. I think certain versions of particularly Protestant Christianity are sort of antithetical to what we believe, where it is a fallen creation that exists separable from the divine. The Gnostics, I think, are actually, even though we love Gnostic material in certain witchcraft circles, we might like the Pistis Sophia or whatever, that very dualistic matter is evil.
He knows all the fancy words.
God bless me. That matter is evil and only spirit is true. We don't buy that at all. It's spirit and flesh united as one. So, into the body of thy servant and priestess. So I think that it's very important to realize that. So it's a good point to bring it up. But that is what we mean by witchcraft in nature. We mean that living, breathing, biological reality of which we are a part. The soup that birthed, the entire race of humans on this planet is sacred. And we are going to continue to see its evolution as sacred. And I don't think as witches we're ever going to step away from that completely, no.
I think that witchcraft, is there are people who join witchcraft because of the feminine quality, the divine feminine, and because of the nature too. Mm-hmm. There are not a lot of, The Abrahamic religions do not say a whole lot about nature. I mean, if you really study them, they do, metaphorically. But the average Christian or the average Muslim or perhaps even the average, Jewish practitioner, they're not, heaven and earth are separated on some level. This is all going to end, and it's about going off and leaving it. Hopefully I'm not saying anything.
No, I agree with Brian. What Brian is saying that's 100% true is, are there really deep, beautiful, natural philosophies in these religions? Yes, but Brian's talking about your average Christian, your average Sunday pulpit. And in that average Sunday pulpit, what he's saying is what's being preached.
They're leaving. Yeah. This is all doomed to hell anyway. So trying to save the planet, that's not happening.
They're not sitting around reading deep Christian theology about nature.
Witchcraft, other pagan movements, modern Druidism are all, Native American medicine people are all connected to more of a natural way of doing things. So I think spiritually, I do think, back to what Ellie said, we are all born here. Power of place, let's start with that.
Earth, yeah.
We are born on Earth. This is power of place. No matter where you are, every culture, every seed, everything that we've done has come here. Every human being that has ever existed has died here. I don't know if we have had a human being die in space yet. We have. But, for the most part, every soul is here and gone. I don't think that it's bad that witchcraft is so intimately connected with nature. I think we should be. Our gods are natural, our guardians are natural, we are natural. A lot of the things we do are. I do think we are the perfect catalyst for a spiritual side to environmental movement, and I think we've done that. I think, however, the intellectual side of Levi and I kind of shakes a little bit of a fist on the delusional side of it. And I think we also both probably come to the same conclusion. There's not much point in that.
Yeah.
But you can't help it. You're like, no, don't think that the ancient cult of, such and such was really like, we should all recycle. I don't think that was in their mindset.
It's a modernism. It's anachronism to put them in
But some things modern are good and better and needed. Yeah. And I do think it was once said that not all witches are healers. Not all witches are healers, but all witches heal. And I don't know who said that, so I'm quoting someone, but I think that when it comes to the planet, that is the perfect thing. We are working fertility. Is it fertility for making babies? Probably not. Is it fertility for crops? Well, yes, we want to eat. Yeah. Usually we say it's for fertility of magic or for fertility of the mind or the spirit. But there is that fertility, which is just, can this planet as a garden sustain itself, heal itself, and renew itself? Because we are poisoned. We are poisoned. Yeah. And, I'm going to get real weird here now. Fukushima is a very dangerous thing that they're not talking about. Radiation is being found all over the planet. I first discovered this in American California wine. They found it in the vineyards in California that it has Fukushima. I don't know how they know this, but they do. They're just not talking about it. Has Fukushima. They're saying it's in safe levels. You just watch. Cancer's going to continuously be on the rise. A veterinarian friend I have told me recently they've had more cancer in dogs in the last couple of years than they have ever had. It's probably not just in dogs. So we do have a real challenge. The planet, I believe, will survive.
Absolutely.
Will we? And as magical beings who think we can change the weather, well, let's try to change something more important, that there will be a weather to change.
Or a weather that's functional.
Yeah. So there's lots of planets in this universe that we don't know if they've ever sustained life, but we know they're not functional now. Who knows? Maybe Mars that once was like us. It's not anymore. Everything ends. But I think that we have an obligation and a reason for being here. And if the craft has a modern day purpose, I do think a reconnection to nature is part of that.
Absolutely.
I do. I'm not a freak about it, but I do believe it's true. I
think the last thing I'll say is this. I keep saying it over and over again tonight, and I don't know if I've like put it out there correctly. When I say that I think biology is like a theophany, literally that word means like expression of God. What I mean is it's been said in 1,000 different ways, but you are an actual enfleshed thing experiencing consciousness in a universe where that seems rare, at least in our, in our purview, right? In our own little corner of it.
We could be in a black hole.
Biological life is rare in our corner, at least. Maybe we'll find tons of inhabited planets. I'm sure there are.
Unless our whole Milky Way is in a black hole already.
The point is, but the point is like, I mean, it is, but the point is biological life to me seems divine, right? It is a divine thing. And so the bios, the Greeks had that concept, the living thing, the zoe, the life. That is what matters. We all share the same DNA, the same small little proteins that are building blocks of life, made into this panoply of amazingness. That is divinity. And I will not divorce myself from it for some sort of postmodern pipe dream. And witchcraft, I think, will always remind us of those cycles.
So to give you what I think Levi, and I'm going to speak for both of us in this way, we are totally environmentalists in the fact that we believe in the God and the goddess of nature and the fact that everything is connected. The one is all, including this planet. Like, this is the circle. This planet is the most magical circle we have. We believe in that in witchcraft. We are not necessarily, believing that witchcraft is about rocks and herbs and things like that.
Yeah.
That's magic, and it's all fine and good, but that's not really our stick, or how we fundamentally work magic. Yeah. But it's there. It's a part of it. But anyway, we're going to give you guys an adieu. We are going to have our episode next week, and I thought we would do it on the Sabbats, since it will actually be on the calendar year Candlemas. However, we've already done our Candlemas.
We have.
So we're free that evening. So that will be that. And then we're going to take a little break because I'm going to be traveling to London. So we'll be off for a couple of weeks. But hopefully the sound will be working right off the shot.
We shall see.
Thank you for those who did not give up on us.
Thank you so much, guys.
Remember the bees. Remember the animals. Remember the precious creatures that we share this planet with. Remember that the raw elements, the water and the earth, is being poisoned, and we do have to do our part. So try to recycle. Try, however, to use materials that are renewable, and don't buy plastic if you can help it. Don't buy onto the straw fad, or if you do buy plastic, try to reuse it yourself, or see if you can. When you go buy vegetables and fruit at the store, don't buy it in a plastic container if you can help it. I do these things myself, but it doesn't need to be, I find myself doing it at the store where I'm like, I feel like it's got to be in a bag because the person's going to touch it. A lot of people have already touched it. You're going to wash it anyway. Just grab the stuff. You don't need it. Try to use less. That's the real key. And have a great week, everyone.
Go somewhere beautiful in nature.
There were covens in Europe. That's what they're called. The congregation. Covens in Europe, in America, and in Australia, and they have one right here.
Oh, yes,
that whole bunch. The parties, the singing, and the